It was just like, I mean, they were like gurgling, like there was just so much blood coming out. But we shot that. It took 6 hours to shoot that whole scene. So after a few minutes, the corn syrup that is the blood that we're using starts to harden and get sticky. And then the clothes start to harden and bind to your skin and all the little hairs that are on your skin. But it's okay because somebody came to my rescue. And that was when Sam was weeping over my body and his tears magically made all the blood unstick. And it was like little angel baby tears. And had I known, I would have, bottled it. But I still, to this day, I haven't been able. It's very elusive.
It was
like Chuck Norris.
It was my grace.
That was my worst. I think my best was the ones that I don't have memories of like that. Any one of those. What about you?
I think my favorite death scene with true death, not choosing to be okay with death, might have been when Aldous stabbed me in the back because it felt legitimate, it felt final, it felt scary, and then we carried on obviously with dead Sam in the bed. One of the most difficult death scenes I would say for me to deal with on the show was the scene, and this is weird, it's just logistics. Your hair is everywhere.
You're welcome.
Was the scene where I forget how Dean dies, but during Mystery Spot, I didn't treat Mystery Spot as a joke. The only way I could kind of make sense of it was to treat it seriously, like my brother's really dying. And there was a scene at the bottom of a stairwell in the parking lot. Maybe he gets shot by a car thief or something.
Yeah.
Yes. And in a really weird way, it was just difficult to film it and difficult to find it. And a lot of times we're shooting on stages and they say, okay, everybody quiet. And everybody gets quiet and you have a chance to think about your thoughts. But then sometimes they can't rent the roads, they can't rent the streets, they can't shut down the airplanes or the trains. And so you're shooting the scene where your brother's been shot in the parking lot and you hear like people having dinner and laughing across the street and it's kind of distracting. So remember that one was difficult logistically. There were a few easier takes than others, and that's a weird thing to say, I guess. But I think those are my favorite and least favorite. Now, the question of when the Winchesters have been okay with death has a different answer, but as far as deaths go, I'm gonna stick with that. Thank you.
Mental illness sufferers would probably like to know.
You're dealing with it, you're not suffering. You're dealing with it. And you know what? If you're here today talking to us, then you're a mental illness conqueror, not a sufferer. So keep conquering.
Okay. How did you muster up the courage to tell everyone that you had a mental illness, and how do you cope on bad days?
I got to a place where I frankly didn't have a choice. It was that or nothing, and it was a call for help, and help was offered. More than I ever could have imagined. And a lot of times, if you've dealt with mental conditions, then you just have an extra emotion bone, you have an extra thought bone, and some people can ignore it, some people can deal with it, and I'm truly happy for them. I couldn't, not without help and thought, but I realized looking at it was the best way to deal with it and conquer it. And so it got to the point where I had no other option. And thankfully I had y'all guys and some friends and family, including this short-haired dude next to me. Day by day. Love you.
Hey there.
Hi. So this question is for you, Jensen. My friends and I were wondering if in Lazarus Rising, for the scene where you come out of the grave, did they really have to bury you? Because they really did a good job of making it look like it, if not.
So, yes.
Next question.
What they did was they dug a fairly big hole, probably it's probably about 5 feet deep and about, I don't know, let's say five feet wide. And
How
they
long
put
was it?
5 feet. Let's go 5 all around.
It was a 5 square.
So, and it basically looked like a little, like a tornado shelter in the ground. So there was a hatch that they then covered it with sod and stuff after I got in. So I kind of crouched down and crawled in there, and then there was, in the ceiling, there was a hole about this big. And it had neoprene laid over it, so you know, like a wetsuit. And then it had just 2 layers of it, and then they poured dirt and everything all over that, so that it was basically under the ground level.
How many feet?
Like 13. And then I had to crawl through that little gap and bust through all the dirt. I will say the worst part about it was it was in the dead of summer, and it was probably close to 85, 90 degrees that day, and they didn't have any ventilation in the box. And so it was just it was so hot. Like you just immediately just pouring sweat and waiting for them to just, you know, slate and roll camera and get on with it. And then when they said action, then I start crawling through, and then just all the dirt is just like sticking to me and the twig, and it was bad. Allergy season, and I'm like, because that's how I sneeze. It's very disruptive. It's angry.
And always into a microphone.
Yeah.
I can't. Has anybody ever seen Ace Ventura: Pet Detective when nature calls? I can't help. The first time I watched it was amazing, but ever since then, whenever we're referring to it, I can't help but think about Jensen as Jim Carrey, like crawling out of the rhino, like.
That's what it felt like. Yeah, so that was
just handsomer.
It's
Need some water?
It was awful. I need a shower. Yeah, so that was pretty bad. But yes, I was buried. Actually, and then getting to another time when I was buried in a coffin, alive, and I punched through it, and the dirt came down. Right? I don't remember what episode that was. That's what I thought. It's the same one, and then I crawl out. But the beginning of it is I wake up in the coffin. So I bust through the wood, and this was shot on stage, and so they had, you know, the one side of the coffin missing so that they could shoot the camera through it. So I'm sitting there, and I bust through the wood, and instead of dirt, which I guess I would have been fine with, they somehow thought that they'd be cool and nice to me and make it ground up Oreos. So they literally just put bags and bags of Oreos in a blender, blended it all up, and that was the dirt that they packed, that they had ready to just fall on my face once I cracked it open. So
take 5, he was like getting a larger size of pants.